Okay, so this time, someone sent in something really interesting. They want us to look into the evil eye.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're going to do a deep dive into a YouTube video featuring Newman Ali Khan.
Right.
And I think a lot of people probably know him. He's a pretty well-known Islamic scholar, and he's got some really interesting thoughts about this whole concept of the evil eye.
Yeah, he's got some fascinating interpretations of it.
Yeah, so like, what is it that he's actually saying about the evil eye?
Well, I think what's really cool is he challenges kind of those common, almost superstitious ideas about it. And he does that by really focusing on the Quran.
Oh, okay. So using the Quran to sort of debunk some of the common interpretations.
Exactly. So, for example, he's basically suggesting that maybe this popular belief that someone can harm you just by looking at you with envy, that might be a misinterpretation of what the Quran is actually teaching.
So he's not saying that it doesn't exist at all, but maybe we're not understanding it properly.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're missing the point or misinterpreting it. He uses some really vivid examples to get this across. Like,
Okay.
for instance, he asks, if the evil eye was really that powerful, wouldn't a newly elected president just melt under the gaze of a jealous nation?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I get what you mean. It makes you think about like how do these superstitions develop in the first place?
He also talks about this almost comical story about a woman at a wedding,
Mm.
and she develops this rash just because an old lady didn't say masala to ward off the evil eye.
Oh gosh. So for anyone who might not know, can you explain what masala means in this context?
Yeah, of course, masalas, this Arabic phrase basically means what Allah has willed. It's used a lot to express appreciation for things, especially for something beautiful or someone's good fortune. And people believe saying it helps ward off the evil eye.
Huh. Okay, so it's like a verbal protection almost.
Exactly.
Okay, so going back to these examples that he's using, what's he trying to get at with all this? It sounds like he's focusing more on the idea of jealousy rather than some kind of magical power in a look.
I think you're spot on. He keeps emphasizing the destructive nature of hassad. That's the Arabic word for envy or jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggests that this might be the real evil eye, so to speak.
Oh, interesting. So like he's saying that while the evil eye is mentioned in the Quran, the emphasis is maybe more on the real world consequences of jealousy rather than some supernatural ability.
Exactly. It's about how those emotions actually impact people.
So is he saying then that the evil eye can't cause physical harm, like illnesses or accidents or those sorts of things?
Yeah, that seems to be his argument. He says believing that the evil eye could cause those things would go against the Islamic belief in Allah's preordained plan.
Oh, okay. So it's like a theological contradiction.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay, so if it's not about this magical power coming out of your eyes, does that mean that a look holds absolutely no power then?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, he acknowledges that we've all kind of felt that unsettling feeling.
Right.
When you can tell that someone's gaze is just loaded with emotion, even if you can't quite put your finger on exactly what they're feeling.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've definitely felt that. And what's interesting is that he actually points to a specific verse in the Quran, right, where it describes disbelievers staring with such intense hatred. It's almost as if they could make you fall off your steps just by looking at you.
Yes, that's a powerful image, right?
Yeah,
And you might think that it supports the traditional view of the evil eye.
right, right.
But that's not how Nouman Ali Khan interprets it.
So how does he explain that verse then?
He focuses on the Quran's description of the disbelievers' hatred, their palpable negative emotions. He's saying it's not about some magical power coming from their eyes. The real danger, he suggests, lies in the very real threat posed by people who are filled with animosity.
So it's more about being cautious around people who might have ill intentions toward you, not because they can magically inflict harm, but because their actions might actually be driven by those negative emotions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing real human behavior and motives.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense, actually. But it raises another question for me then. If the evil eye isn't this magical force, how do we protect ourselves from those negative vibes, from those people who might have those kinds of feelings towards us?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think a lot of people really grapple with. If we move away from the idea of supernatural curses, what tools do we have left?
Yeah, that's a really important point.
It is. And thankfully, Nouman Ali Khan offers some guidance on this too.
Okay, so how does he suggest that we deal with this negativity that can come from other people?
He really emphasizes the importance of trusting in Allah's plan
Yeah.
and not letting fear control our actions. He reminds us that no one can actually harm us without Allah's permission.
So in essence, he's saying the evil eye, at least in that traditional sense, can't overpower Allah's will.
Exactly. And he brings it back to the idea of hassad or jealousy playing a huge role in all of this.
So he's not shying away from the fact that jealousy is a powerful emotion and that it can lead to really destructive behavior.
Not at all.
Yeah.
He even suggests that hassad itself might be the real evil eye, because it can lead to these really negative consequences for both the person who feels it and the one it's directed towards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we handle those feelings of hassad then? Both when we're the ones feeling them and when they're directed at us?
Well, first and foremost, he says, you have to seek refuge in Allah. You have to recognize that those feelings of jealousy are a test from him.
Okay.
He encourages us to focus on our own blessings and find contentment in what we have, rather than just constantly comparing ourselves to others and feeling envious.
So it's about shifting your perspective,
Yeah,
cultivating gratitude instead of getting caught up in what other people have.
exactly. And he also really stresses the importance of good character and doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
He suggests that if we focus on our own spiritual growth and we strive to be better people, we can actually lessen the negative effects of hassad, both when we're feeling it and when others might be directing it towards us.
This is really making me rethink this whole concept of the evil eye. It's like he's saying the Quran might be talking about something much deeper than just a magical stare.
I agree with you. And I think this new understanding opens up a whole new set of questions about how we deal with negativity, jealousy, and the very real power of human emotions.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground, and there's still so much more to unpack.
You know, it's really striking how he manages to kind of debunk all these superstitions surrounding the evil eye, but he still does it all within the framework of the Quran.
Right, he's not just throwing the whole concept out the window.
Exactly. And he acknowledges that there are, genuine dangers out there, real negativity that we need to be aware of. But he encourages us to really base our understanding on the Quran and not get swept up in all these unfounded fears.
So it's about finding that balance between recognizing potential harm, but also maintaining your faith.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's like recognizing that negativity exists, but not getting totally paranoid about it. Trusting in Allah's protection, but still taking practical steps to safeguard yourself.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially these days. We're just bombarded with negativity constantly. In the news, on social media, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole discussion so relevant, I think. It's not just about the evil eye. It's about how we navigate a world where threats can feel very real, even if they aren't.
Yeah.
How we ground ourselves in our faith while still being mindful of what's going on around us.
So if we're moving away from this idea of the evil eye as like a magical curse, how does that change how we think about protecting ourselves from negative energy or ill wishes?
Well, he doesn't really prescribe any specific rituals or anything like that for protection, but he does talk a lot about the importance of spiritual resilience.
Okay.
Strengthening our connection with Allah through prayer, remembrance, good deeds.
So it's more of an internal process than an external one, like cultivating inner peace and strength so you're less vulnerable to outside influences.
That's a really insightful way to look at it.
Yeah.
And he also talks about seeking refuge in Allah.
Right, like reciting certain verses from the Quran for protection, like Ayat al-Kursi.
Exactly. And it's important to note that he's not saying that we should just ignore real threats or pretend that the world is all sunshine and rainbows.
Right, he's not advocating for being passive or naive.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's more about understanding that our ultimate source of protection comes from our faith in Allah.
Okay, so it's about putting your trust in a higher power while also, taking reasonable precautions in the real world.
Exactly. A kind of holistic approach that balances spiritual awareness with practical wisdom.
I think that's something anyone can benefit from, regardless of their beliefs. Finding ways to build inner resilience and deal with negativity is something we all have to do.
Couldn't agree more. And I think he offers a really helpful framework for doing just that. It's about recognizing that negative forces do exist, but not letting them control you. Finding that sweet spot between trusting in your faith and taking responsibility for your own well-being.
You know what I find really interesting about his approach is that it's both empowering and liberating at the same time.
Oh yeah, I see that too. How so?
Well, on the one hand, it's empowering because it reminds you that you do have agency. You can choose how you react to negativity. You can choose to focus on your faith and your connection with Allah.
And on the other?
It frees you from that fear and superstition that can be associated with this traditional idea of the evil eye. You don't have to be constantly worrying about curses and hexes and things like that.
Yeah, it allows you to approach those situations with a lot more clarity and confidence.
Exactly. Instead of being consumed by fear, you can focus on cultivating inner peace and growing spiritually.
That's a much more constructive and ultimately more effective way to face all those challenges.
This deep dive has honestly really challenged me to rethink the evil eye and how I protect myself from negativity in general.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
It's been such a fascinating look at the connection between faith reason and human emotion.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about Newman Ali Khan's perspective on the evil eye and how we can protect ourselves from negativity. But I'm curious to hear your take on all of this. What really resonated with you?
That's a great question.
Mm.
I think for me, what really stood out was this emphasis on personal responsibility. He's not offering some quick fix or magic formula. Instead, he challenges us to really develop that inner strength and resilience, to turn to our faith for protection, and to really focus on our own choices and intentions.
That's such a powerful message, especially today when it feels like so many people are looking for those easy answers and those external solutions.
Exactly. It's a reminder that true protection starts from within, from our own relationship with the divine and from the decisions we make every single day.
And that's something that really goes beyond any specific religion or belief system. It's a universal truth.
I think you're absolutely right. There's something universally true about the idea that we have the power to shape our own reality, to choose how we deal with negativity and find strength and resilience in the face of adversity.
It's such an empowering thought, isn't it?
It really is. It reminds us that we're not just helpless victims. We have the ability to make choices. We can cultivate that inner strength to face whatever life throws at us with grace and resilience.
So Numan Ali Khan's view of the evil eye isn't just about, debunking superstitions. It's about developing a much deeper and more empowering understanding of how we interact with the world around us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that negativity exists, but choosing to focus on your faith, your resilience, and your own inner strength.
And that's a message we can all learn from.
Couldn't agree more. It speaks to the very heart of what it means to be human, to face challenges with courage and compassion, to find strength in your beliefs, and to cultivate inner peace so you can really navigate the world with grace and wisdom.
That's beautifully said. This deep dive has honestly opened up a whole new way of thinking about the evil eye and the power we have to influence our own experiences.
I agree with you. It's been such a fascinating journey exploring the intersection of faith, reason, and human emotion.
And it's a journey that we can all continue on individually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The exploration doesn't stop here. It's an ongoing process of learning, reflecting, and growing.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the evil eye. It's been a truly enlightening conversation. This whole conversation has got me thinking about those little blue eye amulets you see everywhere.
Oh yeah, the bazaar.
Yeah, exactly. They've become like this universal symbol for protection against the evil eye.
It's pretty amazing how that symbol has transcended cultural boundaries.
Yeah.
You know,
But if we're kind of shifting away from that traditional idea of the evil eye, does something like the nazar become more about symbolism than actual, like, magical power?
That's a really good question. It makes you think about how cultural practices and deeper theological understandings sometimes diverge.
So are those amulets basically meaningless then?
Well, not necessarily. I don't think so. Symbols can still hold a lot of power, even if it's not literally like a magical force field or something.
I see what you mean. So, for example, even if a nazar doesn't actually deflect some evil beam, it could still serve as a reminder to stay grounded in your faith or to, focus on positive energy.
Precisely. It can act as a kind of prompt for those internal shifts we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Things like gratitude, seeking refuge in Allah.
Yeah.
It's not about the object itself, but what it represents to the person.
It almost becomes like a mindfulness tool.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And that perspective doesn't really contradict Numan Ali Khan's message either. It's not about relying on a charm for protection, but about strengthening your own spiritual resilience.
I see. This deep dive has really gone beyond just the evil eye, hasn't it? We've touched on how people interpret religious teachings, how culture influences beliefs, and how we try to deal with uncertainty and find ways to feel protected in a world that can often feel pretty unpredictable.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's been a really multifaceted discussion.
Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you wanted to add about the evil eye? Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing to remember is to approach these topics with a critical and discerning mind. It's really easy to get caught up in fear and superstition. But Numan Ali Khan reminds us to root our understanding in knowledge and reason to seek refuge in our faith, and to really cultivate that inner strength that allows us to move through the world with grace and resilience.
That's a really powerful message to end on. And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the evil eye and maybe even sparked some questions of your own. Until next time, keep diving deeper